am now recording, so I'm just going to share my screen and make sure that you can see that. Can you see my screen? It should say Google Slides as a learning tool.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. And I'm just going to minimize all the video so you can see the full presentation. But Cheryl, since it's just you and I, there is going to be time at the end of the presentation for questions. But
Sure.
please, I'll make sure I do some pauses throughout to make sure that if you have any questions that you could ask them and I can hopefully address them to the best of my ability. But there will be, please just seeing as that was just yourself, feel free to stay off mute and interject if you have any questions,
Mm.
but I will allow, I won't go too fast.
Okay.
Okay, excellent. So I am doing a presentation on Google Slides as a learning tool. Now, the first thing to answer would be, what is Google Slides? So first off, I did do my Creative Commons, so that's my copyright there. But what is Google Slides? I believe that most people are familiar, high level, what Google Slides is. But I thought I would go into a little bit more detail so that before I start addressing the effectiveness of it in adult education, um, making sure that our audiences and everyone has a good idea of what Google Slides is and what the platform contained. So, basically, it is a presentation platform. I think it's important, though, to point out that it is a free presentation platform. So, especially for students in the education world, where we are people are watching every penny. Having a free platform like Google Slides is very helpful. Um, it was created by Google, and it was really created as an economical option to PowerPoint. And it does have a lot of similar functions as PowerPoint. It's not exactly the same as PowerPoint, but it is very similar and can be used in a similar fashion as PowerPoint, but it is free. One thing that Google Sheets does is it allows for collaboration, and I am going to elaborate on that a lot more during my presentation. But one of the most, in my opinion, most significant benefits of Google Slides is the options that you can use to collaborate using that platform. It's relatively easy to use. And I'm going to talk a bit about sharing different documents and sharing presentations and our ability to copy templates and use that. But in general, it is quite easy to use. What I will talk about later, though, is the fact that to be more effective, especially in an educational and teaching platform, you do need to, in my opinion, get more involved and engage with it. But on a higher level, it is quite easy to use. And it is web based, meaning that when you create a Google Sheets or a Google Slides presentation, you're able to save it and you can do an HTTPS, so you can do a web based link and share that with anybody as long as they have access to Google Slides and they're web based. Cheryl, before I go on to the next slide, are you familiar enough after this slide with your experience on what Google Slides is?
Yeah, I've never used it. I'm using Google Docs right now, but this
Yeah.
this is good. I
Okay,
like yeah.
great. Well, I'll just move on to the next slide then. So just to give a bit of an idea of what this presentation is going to entail, I will be relating the four E's all throughout this presentation. So the four E's that I'm going to be talking about are excite and engage. So how does Google Sheets engage your audience, specifically geared towards an adult education perspective? How effective is Google Sheets at educating our audiences? And how effective is Google Sheets at providing evaluation of our students? So those are the four E's that we will be discussing throughout this presentation. So the first question that comes up is, how effective is Google Slides at exciting your audience? So can Google Slides excite and motivate your audience, which can be a challenge, especially in today's day where a lot of our teaching or a lot of our training is taking place in a remote environment. So it can be a challenge to really get your audience excited when you're actually not physically in the room with them. Um, so in my opinion, it depends on really how well you use Google Sheets. if you don't use your own imagination and simply just use the templates that are provided to you, there is a risk of running a boring presentation and losing your audience's engagement. However, one of the biggest benefits of Google Slides is it does have many features available that, if used effectively, you can have the desired impact on your audience. So the first one is adding GIFs. And I'm not sure, I did Google on how to pronounce that, GIFs, GIFs, but you do have the ability to add GIFs into your presentation. And a lot of times it can be just for humor, a light humor, just to get your audience engaged. It really does need to be relevant to the topic that you're teaching, but GIFs can be a little bit of a lighthearted way to keep your audience engaged and focused on the topics that you are presenting. You can also embed video recordings into Google Slides. So if you're presenting a topic and you want to pause throughout your presentation to actually show a video, you can embed a link right in Google Slides and click on the link and the video recording will show. So again, as long as the video recording that you're using is relevant to the topic that you're teaching, it can be a very exciting way, a very productive way to get your audience excited. I always relate it to when you were in high school and you would walk into the classroom and you would see the film projector in your class. I don't know if you can relate, but you're always like, yay, there's going to be a film today. So when there's video recordings throughout the presentation, it's a good way of getting the audience slightly excited about what's coming. You can also provide audio recording links as well in a very similar fashion to the video links. And you also have the option of using exciting animations and transitions. There are so many different options within Google Slides to animate the actual images that you're creating and embedding in the presentation, and also transitioning between your actual points that you're making, any written words you might have, or any images. You can do interesting and fun transitions, again, just to keep your audience somewhat excited about what it is you're presenting. Cheryl, before I move on, any questions on those four options as far as using in Google Slides to excite your audience?
Nope, nope.
Okay. So my overall grade that I gave it was Google Slide was a B. The reason why I didn't give it an A as far as exciting your audience is because really, in my opinion, as the presenter, you need to be able to use Google Sheets and third-party platforms that integrate properly in order to make the presentation exciting. So it has the capability of it being exciting, but it's not a given. You have to really use your imagination, understand the topic, and understand your audience. And if you do that and use the tools properly, then you can make your presentation exciting. So the next question is, how effective and how well does Google Slides do at engaging your students as active participants in their learning? So Google Slides is a platform that allows students to directly collaborate with each other as well as the rest of the curriculum that they're learning, whether it be in post-secondary education, where students are collaborating with each other or with their professor, or if you're in a professional work environment and you're training or teaching a new concept to employees, they can engage and collaborate together. So collaboration really does lead to effective engagement. So the first thing about collaboration is when you're creating a Google Slides document, you're able to use it to communicate and collaborate along with other people, all depending on who you actually are sharing the document or the Google Slides with. So when you create a Google Slides presentation, you have the ability to share it with whomever you want. And one of the great things about it is that you can actually determine what kind of access those individuals that you're sharing the presentation with have. So they can either be someone that would just view your presentation only, or you could even make them available to provide comments. And that's where the collaboration and interaction comes in. So they can actually look at your presentation and make comments. You can also make them an editor so that they can actually change the document if you would like. So in that sense, being able to share and change the ability of what people can do to your presentation is really an effective tool at really helping your students and your participants to engage and collaborate together. So in my opinion, collaboration essentially leads to better engagement. You also have the ability to make a copy of a presentation, which is effective in collaboration and in engagement as well. So, as an instructor or as an educator, if you create a Google Slides document, but you actually want your students or the people that are learning from you to take your presentation and make some edits to it to reflect what you've been teaching them, they can actually make a copy of the identical presentation you did. They can make it their own, and then they can make all their required edits based on your instructions as the teacher or the educator. So that's a very effective tool in getting people engaged in their learning. And on the tailcoats of that is things like quizzes and assignments. So being able to copy and share Google Slides, you're able to do quizzes and assignments. And I actually have a specific example that I'm going to talk about later on in this presentation. But you can actually create a Google Slides where there's a quiz on there, and you can actually share that with your students. All they need to do, as previously talked about, was they can copy your Google presentation, make it their own, and they can answer all your quiz questions, save it, and then share it with you. And as an instructor, you're able to actually see how they performed on the quiz. And you can also extend that further with more in-depth interactive assignments as well. So primarily because of the um, ability to collaborate effectively, I would give Google Slides an A as it relates to engaging your audience. So Cheryl, before I move on to the third E, is there any questions that I can address with you for engaging our audience?
So the evaluation is on the slide itself, like you can create the evaluation of the quiz on the slide itself?
You can, yes, absolutely. And I'm going to I think I believe that is the fourth E that I had. And it kind of it's very similar to collaboration, but you are able to provide an actual evaluation for that student. And I'm gonna talk about an actual real life work example that I use in my job that that demonstrates that.
Sure.
Okay. So the next thing is how does Google Slides effectively educate by embracing the four principles of andragogy? Sorry, I'm pronouncing that wrong. Andragogy. It's it's part of our curriculum, and so what I am going to do so that we can follow the next few slides is I am going to briefly describe the four principles that we're talking about. So the first principle of andragogy is involved. So as an adult learner, adults need to be involved in the planning and evaluation of their instruction. So based on the previous slides, I talked about the effectiveness of Google Slides to collaborate and share. They're very effective in addressing this aspect of our excuse me, aspects of education. So being involved is very easy to do as an adult learner using Google Slides. The second of the four aspects is experience. So experience with adult learning, it provides the basis for learning activities. So can these students actually experience what it is you're teaching to them, and how is their experience? In my experience with Google Slides, creating presentations that can be edited to suit the assignment in Google Slides is very helpful. One drawback is that the effectiveness is really reliant on the content provided by the instructor and the type of follow-up that's provided to the student. So again, Google Slides provides the platform to do that work and provide that interactive experience, but it really does rely on the actual level of engagements from both the students and the instructor. The third one that we're going to talk about is interest. So mature students, being mostly adult learners, they need to be interested in the subjects and ensure that the subject that they're learning has relevance to their job and their personal life. So as an educator, you can't solely rely on Google Slides to provide that level of interest. You can tick all the boxes and do the right things and actually use the correct, gifts and exciting presentations. But if the actual subject itself is not interesting, you're not going to do very well at addressing this aspect of adult education. The fourth thing to talk about is problem-centered learning. So adult learning should be problem-centered rather than content-oriented. Since Google Slide is a presentation tool that is content-oriented, Google Slide is not incredibly effective with this. However, if the educator or the instructor is focused on providing the correct content, then Google Slides can help support this aspect. So my grade was a B minus. Specifically because, again, you rely so much on the effectiveness of the instructor and the students actually taking the right course that they actually have an interest in order for Google Slides to be effective. So it's very dependent on many other external factors. So before I go on to the fourth and final E, which is evaluate, Cheryl, can I answer any questions on Google's effectiveness to embracing the 4 principles of andragogy? Andragogy? I keep saying that wrong. I apologize.
No, I no, say
It's a
that
tough
fast
one.
5 times, huh?
It's a tough one to say.
I know.
Okay.
Well
So
done.
thank you. I'm going to move on to evaluating. So I want to talk about how effective Google Slides is at evaluating your student learning, which is really important. I think especially in today's environment where we're doing so much remote learning. I don't know about you, Cheryl, but when I'm teaching a concept or if I'm training somebody, when I'm actually physically in the room with them, I can really gauge my audience and see basically on their physical reaction or how they're responding to the topic, whether they're getting it or not. And that can be a real challenge when you're doing presentations like this and you're not in person. So let's talk about what Google Google does as far as allowing you as an instructor to evaluate the level of your students absorbing what it is you're teaching them. So the first thing I want to talk about is Google Classroom and integration. So it's a whole other presentation to talk about Google Classroom, but Google also recently created Google Classroom, which is it's kind of like Moodle. It's a learning management system, and Google, all aspects of Google, whether it be Google Slides or Google Sheets, they can all integrate live with Google Classroom, which really makes it an effective tool to keep track and evaluate how your students are performing. So I talked earlier about doing quizzes and assignments. Because Google Slides integrates live with Google Classroom, the instructor is able to keep a really good grasp on how their students on an individual level and on a more of a macro level are absorbing and understanding what it is you're teaching them. It also allows for student educator interaction. So again, I'm going backwards a little bit, but I talked previously about your ability to collaborate and interact with your students using Google Slides. That allows you to get some immediate response on how it is your students are learning. So for example, if you're teaching a concept using Google Slides, you're able to interact via Google Slides with your audience by maybe doing a quiz, asking some live questions. So the interactiveness that's live allows you to, during your presentation, get a sense of how it is your audience is absorbing the subject matter. So I'm going to actually talk about an actual example, and I've actually done a slide of an actual example of how I, in my job as a corporate trainer, use Google Slides to evaluate how it is the subjects are responding to my curriculum. So what I did is I taught a curriculum on a learning management system with a lot of video interaction on how to use a specific tool within my organization to target specific sales goals and sales strategies. So at the end of the presentation, students were instructed to open up the Google Slides document that I created for them. And they had to copy it, which I showed in earlier slides, name it themselves, and complete all these questions. As you can see, there's quite a few slides of questions, but as you can see here, I was able to design specific questions relating to the curriculum that I created. And as an instructor, based on each individual's answers that they provided, I'm able to get a really good idea on how well they're grasping the subject matter. So because of those three things, I did give Google Slides a B plus as it relates to providing a platform to evaluate the level of engagement and learning from your audience.
Hmm.
So that concludes my presentation on the effectiveness of Google Slides as an adult learning tool. I'm just going to actually escape and stop sharing here so that we don't have that on our screen. So I hope you don't see that anymore. I just see your face now. Any questions or comments that you wanted to dig into any deeper there, Cheryl?
No, I'm going to look into this a bit deeper after seeing your presentation. The one question I have, the little bit of experience I've had with Google Slides, is that if you're transferring from PowerPoint, it doesn't always translate well.
Yeah, and I've experienced that as well.
Yeah.
Because my company, for example, we don't have PowerPoint because Google Slides is free, so there's significant savings. And very often, what will happen is there are elements of, especially when it relates to animation and transitions, that
Mhm.
PowerPoint has that Google Slides doesn't. So I've experienced that. What I have done is I'll just upload the PowerPoint document,
Mhm.
and then it takes me, I always give myself an hour or so to
Mhm.
make some adjustments, specifically the transitions and
Yeah.
animations that
Right.
relate to Google Slides. So I do experience the same thing as well.
Yeah. How easy are those? Uh,
um and this is my opinion. I find that what it's more challenging to make the animations attractive. I guess that's the right word. As far as eye catching,
mm,
PowerPoint really does give you the ability to make really eye catching and I hate to use the word, but sexy animations. You know what I mean? And Google Slides, it does have the ability, but not as advanced as PowerPoint. Again, that's just my opinion based on my
yeah.
experience with both platforms.
So is there a paid version of Google Slides that has more
Um,
more?
I don't think there is. That being said, though, Google Slides does have the ability to interact with third-party platforms. So
Right.
you can bring in third-party platforms into Google Slides that you could potentially pay for, that I think would help enhance its ability to do
Yeah. Yeah.
more attractive presentations.
Right. Great. Well, it's always one thing will do one thing, the other one does another thing, and it's like there doesn't seem to be anything central, but
No,
I
I know it is, and
yeah,
and no one is perfect, right? And
no,
and and
yeah.
and you know, I if I'm doing a presentation where I'm not interacting with people, I do like using PowerPoint because I can do a lot of really fun things with it. But if I'm doing something where I'm teaching a group of people a concept, I will use Google Slides because I can, again, like I mentioned earlier, I can send them copies and they can
Mm.
interact and make comments. So it's depending on what my need is.
Well, you've given me some ideas here just for an evaluation tool, because
Yeah.
that's the one thing that I want to improve in what I do is more self-assessment and
Great.
evaluation. So yeah, no, this has been great.
Excellent.
I'll experiment. I was not considering doing that, but I will.
Have fun with it. And that's my whole thing is I just have fun with it. And it's kind of
Yeah,
like, oh, I didn't know it could do that. And actually,
yeah,
where I got some really great ideas, and it is on TikTok. I was scrolling through, and it must have read that I was reading up and researching Google Slides, because all
yeah,
of a sudden on my TikTok, all these really neat hints on making fun slides came up. So
yeah,
there's lots of little hints and people, collaborating out there. So
yeah. Well, that was great. Thanks. I will definitely investigate further.
great. I'm glad. Thank you very much, Cheryl.
Thanks. Take
Okay.
good care.
Good luck with the rest of the course.
Thank you. You too.
Take
Thanks.
care. Have a good
Bye.
evening.
Bye.
Bye bye.